Welcome. You're listening to Love Doctor Radio with Dr. Ann Love. We interview the people that you want to hear, celebrities and cutting-edge authors. We discuss current events and controversial topics. Your radio love doctor is a therapist of the Love Clinic in Newport Beach, California. She was a professor of hematology and lectured cardiologists and emergency room physicians at various locations. She worked in the special chemistry and toxicology at Johns Hopkins University Graduate School of Public Health. And now, here is the host of Live with the Love Doctor, Dr. Ann Love.
Hello, folks. You're Live with the Love Doctor. I'm Dr. Ann Love. And I have with me, my guests are the Kesslers, Maria and James Kessler. Now, you may wonder concerning Maria and James, I'm going to share a little bit about how we met. I had decided I wanted to do a show on miracles, things that are outside of the impossible. Oh my God, I got those chill bumps going on. I wanted to do a show on the impossible. And so a few weeks ago, my husband and I went to this Japanese restaurant, and this very tall, good-looking guy with a deep voice says, what did you say? Anyway, you said something.
As I was walking past, you guys were just the picture of love. There was just something so peaceful about you and your husband sitting there that it stopped me. I needed to come in and at least say something and make a comment. And as I approached you guys, it was beautiful. I mean, and you guys were so gracious and you're so kind to be able to accept it.
Yeah. So. Oh my God. And so anyway, so he says something, and he says something about love or whatever. And then we start joking. I said, well, my last name is Love. So, okay. So then at that time, the hostess comes to seat us. He goes on to where he was sitting or whatever. So we go back, and I keep feeling this pull, like I got to get a hold of him. Now, you know I'm a therapist, right? So the tuning fork is going do 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 do. So I'm thinking this guy might be hurting. Maybe he went through a divorce. I don't know what's going on. So I asked my loving and sweet husband, honey, would you go with me over to find him? Because I really feel like, you know, I need to make sure he's okay. He's like, he's a big guy. He's okay. I think he's okay. I think he'll make it. I'm like, but it wouldn't lift. And then, so my husband is texting back and forth with his pastor brother who is in Pennsylvania. So they're texting about draft day. So I'm like, okay, you're into that. I said, would you mind if I went to see if I can find him? So I go over to the hostess and I said, you remember the guy that my husband and I were talking to? Did you see where he went? And so they point me to somebody that worked there. I said, no, he doesn't work there. He was just talking to us. They didn't know where he was. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I missed it. And you know that feeling when you don't follow that? You know, decisions are made. Millions of dollars are made. Boardroom decisions are made by that hunch or that nudge or the Holy Spirit. Right. That we call it. And so just then, here he comes walking up. I'm like, oh my God, there he is. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought I missed you. Are you okay? Blah, 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 blah. And so I'm talking. So he starts telling me about this miracle story, which I'm not going to tell you, but out of the mouths of the woman and the man that lived it, they're going to tell you their story. So, James, why don't we start with you? Just 2 seconds, your first life, 2 seconds, and then what brought you to meet this beautiful lady that you're connected to over there.
I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you were so broken in life that you thought you were fixed. But I was brought up in a small Midwestern town. I was an athlete. I had all of the perks and all the benefits and had all the, I guess, opportunities in life to do pretty much anything. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I had a motorcycle wreck that ended up washing out my football career. Mm-hmm. And I went from being groomed as a child to constantly playing football to not having any real identity. So during that time, during that transition, I ended up falling into some pretty unsavory things. Mm-hmm. I was using steroids. Mm-hmm. I was using, I got into the bar scene. I was doing a lot of different things that weren't becoming a god. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I was so broken I thought I was fixed. I really didn't have a clue who God was. I had no idea.
Funny how broken people think they're okay, right?
Yeah.
You know, our clinic is in Newport Beach and everybody's fine.
Right.
And they drink their troubles away. Anyway, go right ahead.
So, I go from athlete to a bar scene guy. I was working in the nightclubs as a bouncer bartender. And,
He's 6'5", folks. Okay, just to let you know.
And, a lot of the misguidances of that whole lifestyle caught up to me. And I proceeded to have multiple motorcycle wrecks. I've totaled 4 motorcycles. I totaled 3 cars. And every time that I walked away from a car wreck, it emboldened me. And it really made me think I was unstoppable. I was indestructible. And I started buying my own hype. I started buying into my own media on what I was presenting out there. I truly thought heaven did not want me and hell was afraid I was taking over. And that's truly how I lived my life. It was very reckless. It was very dangerous. It was very on the edge. And I wish I could say it was intentional, but I was just living. I was hurt. I was a confused young man. And as I proceeded through life, it got more and more dangerous. It got more and more violent. It got more and more intense. And every time I'd dodge a bullet, I would become more and more emboldened and pretty prideful in who I was as a man. And, I was cursed with the ability to make a lot of decisions on my own, to be able to do a lot of things on my own, to be successful on my own. And that sounds like an oxymoron, but I didn't need God. I had no need for God because I was taking care of it myself. And unfortunately, I was doing well. I did well. And I had an opportunity to move from the Midwest in Chicago, or move from Iowa to Chicago. And the day I accepted the job, the day I was supposed to move into Chicago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And in most people's lives, when you are faced with situations like life and death, or you deal with stuff like cancer or disease or a prognosis, it would slow you down. It only emboldened me and made me more intentional, made me more out of control. And, fortunately for me, I beat cancer.
Yeah, thank God.
And instead of making me slow down, it just sped me up. I was now living downtown Chicago, had a great job. I was making good money, and I'm no longer a small fish in a small pond. I was
a big fish in a big pond.
Big fish in a big pond, living in Chicago, and all the temptations and all the desires of the world were at my fingertips.
Al Capone land.
Yeah.
I grew up in Chicago, so I understand. Yeah.
One of my favorite places in the world, but fortunately for me, that's where I found my wife.
Yeah, yay. There is a reason. There is a reason. Now, just tell us about when Maria came into your life. But, one of the things that it was important that you shared, that you were successful in your own ability.
Right.
And I meet a lot of people. We live in Orange County, and a lot of people are successful.
Right.
According to,
the world standards.
And they don't know that they're broken. So this is going to speak to a lot of people. Thank you.
And for me, I was never a bad kid. I was never a bad guy. I was the guy you wanted your daughters dating. I was the guy you wanted your sons hanging out with.
Mr. Successful. 6'5" football player, right? Yeah.
But unfortunately, I took some of those giftings and some of the talents that God had blessed me so abundantly with, and I used them for my glory. I used them for my pleasures. And, living where we're at now in Orange County, California, you don't see a lot of down and out.
No.
You see a whole lot of up and out, but you don't see a whole lot of down and out.
Yep.
And it breaks my heart that they have this veil of success and a bank account and the beautiful home and the private schools that doesn't allow them to really hit that bottom that they need to hit to be able to cry out and run into the end of themselves and have to cry out to Jesus, man. So as I was in Chicago, I got sick of the lifestyle. I got sick of running. I got sick of 100 miles an hour all the time. And just one day I woke up and I didn't know I was praying, but I was praying. I said, God, I'm tired of this life. Please help me find a small town girl with big city dreams.
Wow.
And I wanted moral fiber. I didn't care what she looked like. I didn't care what she did. I was just looking for something pure, something good.
Wow.
And it was amazing. I kind of checked myself at that point in time. That was the first time that I really had to step back and really say, what is going on? You know, why am I here? What is the purpose? And a good friend of mine's mother was working for United Airlines at the time and was flying with my wife's roommate. And it was cool because Diane would call me up every now and again and say, hey, I've got a friend in Chicago. Could you show him around the city? And, you know, I thought the world of Diane. I was good friends with both her son and her daughter and lived with her here in California at one point in time earlier in my life. So when she said, yeah, could you? It was like, I have to, absolutely. I would love to. It'd be an honor. But now Diane was a few years older than me, and I was assuming that it was a good friend of hers. So I wasn't expecting to have two young, attractive flight attendants around the city of Chicago.
Woohoo!
And it was wonderful, man. I showed up, and I don't know, it was magic. And it was for the first time I saw something that was worth fighting for. It was something that was pure.
It's interesting he used the word pure. When men get ready to come in, they look for something wholesome, something real. Yeah. So, and he found you.
He did.
Tell us a little bit about that, Maria.
Well, the night I met Jamie, I actually didn't care for him at all.
I was waiting for that part.
I was 19 at the time. I had just moved to Chicago. It was like my first big thing I did in my life for myself. And he was 28, so he seemed quite old to me. And by the end of the evening, I told my roommate, we were in the Hancock building in the women's restroom, and I told her, I said, I think I'm going to marry this guy.
Wow. So you just felt intuitively connected?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, because looking back, the whole entire evening, he kind of just annoyed me a little bit. I mean, to be honest. But there was something, inside of me that knew he was going to be my husband. And she even said to me, I thought you didn't like him. And I said, I know, but I think I'm going to marry him.
Wow.
And then that was it. We started dating after that.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. Now, okay, let's move forward a little bit. Well, actually, I want you to share what you said to him, because for a lot of women, you did what I tell women to do. You know, you put that stake in the ground. Tell us about that a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, Jamie and I had met in April of 2001. And I was working for United, living in Chicago, and 9/11 happened. And at that time, I got furloughed from my job, and my choice was either to move to Kentucky back with my family. And at this point, he had gotten transferred to Iowa, and he asked me to come move with him to Iowa. And I knew my family would probably have a heart attack if I did that.
Right.
But I just knew in my heart that if I didn't, that would be the end of it. And I moved to Iowa with him. And fast forward a couple months, United had called me back, and he said, I don't want you to go back. I want you here. And I said, well, I'm not going to quit my job and stay in Iowa until there's a ring on my finger.
If you want it, you better put a ring
Absolutely.
on. Anyway, I'm just saying.
Well, I had all the disadvantages of having a girlfriend, but I didn't have all the advantages. She was out of town a lot flying, so you miss big stuff like holidays, birthdays, and events.
It's hard.
Yeah.
That part is hard. Yeah.
We both wanted the same thing. We just both were going a different way to get there. And so it was Memorial Day weekend, and I had decided to go back to flying. And I was coming home that weekend, and I called him, and I said, listen, I love you, but you need to make a choice if you want me to be a part of your life or not. And until then, I'm moving and I'm leaving. And I broke it off with him, and the rest is history. 3 weeks later, he proposed.
There you go. You got to have a little chutzpah.
Absolutely.
Folks. There you go. If you don't, and I meet so many people, they're afraid to stand up for what they believe. You stood up for what you believe is right. And it was really what he wanted, too. You just had to help him, be encouraged to make that decision.
Well, I had no idea what I wanted. I mean, for the first time in my life, I had something worth living for, something that I truly loved, step into my life. And it seemed too good to be true. I spent the first 6 months trying to chase her off. I was scared who I was. I was scared of what I might do to her.
You might mess it up.
And I didn't want to mess that up. And it took her stepping away. It took her having the intestinal fortitude to be able to stand up to 6'5" Jamie. Say, you know what? No, I need to do this now. And it was hard. And I literally saw my future wife walking away, and I let it happen. I just allowed her to walk away. And it was hard to watch because I loved her. I knew what I wanted, and I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't put it into a focus. I couldn't describe what it was. But I saw her walking away, and it was insane because the second she stepped away, I knew I'd messed up, and it went into plan to I got to get her back.
You know, there's that saying, if you love something, let it go, and if it's meant for you, it'll return. And in your case, it was very, very true.
Absolutely.
You guys, you stood up for what you believed, your values, and a lot of women lower their values. And had you done that, I don't know sometimes if men really value what they have. You don't look like that rare diamond. You start looking like some glass, you know what I mean? So you made a point of saying, I'm the diamond, dude, and I want it on my finger. But anyway, so now move us forward a little bit. You guys are married because I know one of the things that your husband shared with me, he wasn't supposed to have children, you know, and so let's move forward there because your story is compelling, and there are people out there, and they're in a hard place, and they don't know how they're going to make it through that place. And
as a result of the cancer that I had, I was told poignantly it was going to be difficult for us to have children, almost an impossibility. And again, why would somebody want a man who can give her babies? You know, that was eating at my psyche. It was eating at who I was. And I didn't know how I could present that to her. And for the first time in my life, I had something that I loved enough to change. And all that wild recklessness that I used to do just didn't one day stop. My wife stuck through some pretty tough times with me. And it was scary because I gave her every reason to leave. I gave her every opportunity to leave. And I wouldn't have blamed her if she would have left at that point in time. Then we found out we were pregnant.
Yeah. Surprise. Complete surprise. He bought me a dog.
Instead, in lieu of a child.
In lieu of a child.
Here's a furry.
Absolutely.
Now, wait a second. I got to jump in here. That dog was a guarantee that I had 3 to 5 years. That
So
I was
you thought, right?
It was a handshake. It was a handshake, and it was a promise. We got 3 to 5 years. Within 6 days of owning that dog. In fact, she took a pregnancy test before we got the dog. Within 6 days of owning that dog, we found out we were pregnant.
Yeah.
So he thought the dog was going to bail him out, but
Absolutely.
it didn't happen, right?
I was bored.
But it's interesting. You took the pregnancy test, and it was negative.
Yeah.
You know, and then what did you share? You said you just felt led to do it
I woke
again?
up in the middle of the night because I had to use the restroom again, and that was not normal for me, and it was a double pack pregnancy test, and I thought, what the heck, I'll just take the other one, and there it showed pregnant, and I went in and woke him up, and he's like, no, it's probably defective. It's defective, and went back to sleep.
He's like, I got the dog.
Yeah.
It's got to be defective. You know, we got the dog.
So I think I bought 7 different kinds of pregnancy tests the next day, and when he came home from work, I had them all laying on the table.
All 7 of them say positive.
So there's a common theme here. I kind of blew that big moment in our life where it was just kind of like, oh, you're pregnant. That's defective. And it was hard for me to wrap my mind around it because it's something that I had as a desire in my heart, but I didn't think it was a possibility. So as she lays out her 7 tests for me, I was like, okay, we're pregnant. And it was the start of an amazing journey.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell us what happened.
Well, our oldest was born in 2006, and the moment he was born, not long after, he turned blue in the hospital. And
It's usually not a good sign.
yeah,
Yeah.
and nobody seemed concerned or anything. They just came in and suctioned him out and told us he was fine, and we have no idea. You know, it's our first baby. We have no idea what we're doing.
We're clear in California, away from our family.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we
no
don't have a lot of support.
grandparents.
No
to say,
grandparents.
Yeah.
My mom did come. She did come later that evening. But so the first few months of his life was really rough. He would stop breathing all the time throughout the night. And we didn't know at the time that he had a submucous cleft palate with, what am I trying to say?
Acid reflux.
Acid reflux. So he would spit up, and then he would choke on it and stop breathing. So for the first few months, I sat up every night on the couch sleeping with him on my shoulder, because that would be the only way I knew if he needed me to suction him out to help him to breathe again, because I would feel his little body jerk. And still being a new mom, I think, okay, this is just normal. You know, he just has these things. And he wasn't gaining weight. I was trying to nurse him, and he was basically starving because he couldn't suction because of the cleft palate, but we didn't know. And it was really, really rough. And when he was about 3 months old, the pediatrician recommended that we see a specialist. And that's when we found out that he had a cleft palate, and she had diagnosed him with Pierre-Robin syndrome, which now is not the correct diagnosis, but at the time it has a lot of similarities to what his actual diagnosis is. And so we went for a while with that diagnosis, seeing specialists, and I kept telling my husband, I said, I think that he can't hear me. You know, he would always cry in the car, and I did mommy and me yoga, and they would tell us to shake the rattle next to them, and they'd turn their head, and he wouldn't turn. He would just look at me and smile, and I knew that something wasn't right. And we went back to the doctor, and they told us that it could possibly be the brain waves that attach from the ear to the brain. It wasn't sending signals, so they did a sedated ABR where they test the brain response. That came back normal, and they couldn't tell us why he wasn't hearing. And we went to the doctor. They had put PE tubes in his ears when he was 3 months old, and it wasn't until about 4 or 5 months old that all of a sudden he was responding to sound for the first time.
Now, in this situation, coming out of the womb, you know, you find out you're having a baby, and especially it's going to be a baby boy. Man, I had plans for this young man.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that.
I had expectations for my son. He was going to be that football player. He was going to be that tough guy. He was going to do all those things that Daddy used to do. And, I mean, I went as far as I was playing, like, old classic highlight films in his crib when he was a kid, in utero. I was trying to program him.
This visual. You're a jock. You're a jock.
Yeah, but it was.
Yeah.
because athletics and sports, and it was so much of my life growing up that I wanted to bless him with that same thing.
Yeah.
And my son, man, when he came out, I'm looking at him. I'm like, this is my son. You know, this is gonna be. He's gonna take over my throne one day. He's gonna be my man. He's gonna be the.
Oh, yeah. I got one of those at home. Yeah,
and I looked at him, and I had so many expectations for him, and I had so many opportunities to be able to say, "That's my boy." And when we found out that he had something a little bit different, when I found out he was deaf, or that he had Pierre-Robin syndrome, or that he had all these medical terms people were throwing at me, it changed me. It shocked me. It shut me down. And all those awesome opportunities got stolen from me again. I wasn't supposed to have a baby, and then all of a sudden I have a baby, and now my baby might not be with us much longer.
You told me before when we spoke that you blamed yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Talk about that, because a lot of times parents, when they're going through struggles, you naturally go through that process of, it's something I did. Sometimes it has nothing to do with that, but you do go through that.
I look back on the recklessness of my life. I look back at some of the bad stuff that I did, some of the choices that I made, some of the decisions that I made, and I absolutely blame myself. And it was a Porsche Pinto mentality. I was either driving a Porsche or I was driving a Pinto. I was on top of the heap, or the heap was on top of me. And this was just the other shoe that dropped. I wasn't supposed to have kids. Okay, we're having kids. Oh, happy. Oh, another shoe just dropped on me, and this is Jamie's fault. And it was a jacked up theology. It was a jacked up way of thinking, because God never did this to me.
Right.
I was blaming him.
Right.
And that whole wild child mentality that I had, I was putting a big middle finger up saying, how could you do this to me? You know, how could you do this to me? And I did not realize that was praying. And as those dreams and those desires started to unfold in front of me, I felt myself slipping. I cashed out. I threw myself into the one thing that I knew to do, and that was to be a man, go out, work really hard, do 80 hours a week, bring diamonds home to my mom, to my wife, and buy a whole bunch of toys for my baby. And I thought I was being a good man, because that's what I was modeling. And I thought I was doing everything right, and it took a bold woman. It took one bold woman to put a finger in my face and say, Your baby doesn't need toys. He needs a daddy.
Yeah.
Get down on the floor and play with your dad. Play with your son. And be a daddy.
Yeah.
I got mad.
Yeah.
How dare you tell me what to do? I'm a good provider. You drive a nice car. You live in a nice neighborhood. You want me to do what? But she was so right. She was so
But
right.
a lot of men have that identity. Their role is to provide, and they'll provide even if it takes 15 hours a day.
Yeah.
How did you feel during that process? Because here you have a special needs child, and you're by yourself.
It was a hard place to be.
And away from your family.
Absolutely.
That's another thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I felt like I was a single mom. I felt like I didn't have a husband. And I just remember at times thinking, what did I do? What did I do? You know, I have this baby, and I felt like a single mom. And we were at a really rocky point in our relationship in that time in our life, because it was the same thing again before when we were trying to get married. We both wanted the same thing, but we both had this idea of how we were going to get there to get it, and we were butting heads.
Yeah.
And it just got harder as the time went on, you know, through his surgeries. And he had a cleft palate repair surgery when he was 10 months old. And then when he was about a year and a half, the doctor had finally asked us to do genetic testing. And he was out of town for work, and on Thursday, the doctor called me and told me, actually, the correct diagnosis was that he has 22q deletion, which is a deletion of his 22nd chromosome.
Wow.
And
What did that mean for the people out there?
So I'll let you get into that diagnosis, but this is the part where I'm out of town. She's home by herself.
Wow. And getting that news.
And when you get that news, I don't care if it's a cold or if it's strep throat, what do? You go to Google, which is the worst thing you could ever do. And if you bring up Google, it's not a very pretty picture. It's pretty bleak. And for us, it was a death sentence.
yeah,
In a secular way, it was bad news. It was not anything good or anything positive. So as far as the 22q deletion, there's how many abnormalities?
I want to say like 160 to 180 different health abnormalities that are anomalies, they call it, that these children can have. There's not one the same.
Wow.
So, of course, that's the first thing we read. They have a short lifespan. And
Well, you know, folks, you're live with the Love Doctor. We have Maria and James Kessler, and they're telling the story of their baby who they just found out has a chromosomal anomaly, and it's going to deviate completely for their life. This is a miracle story. So you're going to have to tune in next week and find out how the story ends. I'm live with the Love Doctor. This is Dr. Ann Love. Hi, I'm Dr. Ann Love, and you're live with the Love Doctor. And I have with me again this week Maria and James Kessler. Now, if you were tuning in last week, you remember the stories. They have a miracle story. And as part of that story, they kind of shared a little bit about their marriage, coming together. And they finally, now James is 6'5", he's a football player, you know, comes from this testosterone background. He gets married to the love of his life. He wanted something pure and wholesome. He got it. They have their first baby, and then bam, the baby has a chromosomal anomaly. Pick up your story then.
okay, so we got the diagnosis that he had the deletion of his 22nd chromosome, and the next day I found out that I was pregnant with our second child. And
wow.
yes,
Special
wow
needs
is-
and pregnant.
absolutely.
You know, oh my gosh.
And I always say I was devastated. I mean, I was super excited that we were having another baby, but devastated because it was going to be hard for me to watch another child go through everything that my son had already gone through.
Yeah.
And we were at a point in our life where our relationship was so strained because of the stress of all of it. And we had no idea if we were carriers of the genetic defect. So we had no idea if this baby would also have the same thing.
Wow.
So that was a true
And plus,
concern.
you're pregnant, so
Yeah.
you don't really have the energy and the strength to, while you're carrying this baby, to really cover all of the emotional ups and downs
Absolutely.
with a new baby.
Absolutely.
And a husband that was MIA.
Wow.
And I'm not proud of that. And I really got to watch as I tell our story that it doesn't turn into a bragamony about all the stupid stuff I used to do. I'm kind of embarrassed to think that a guy thinks, bad guy moves into my house, I'm gonna take care of it.
Right. Right.
I folded. I fell back into my coping mechanisms. I fell back into the way I used to deal with stuff. And to hear that your son has a life expectancy that's shorter, potentially 2 years.
Wow.
To hear that your son's deaf, your son's going to go blind, and you just go down the list of the anomalies in your life. It was confusing. Yeah. It hurt.
Overwhelming.
And the one thing I knew how to do was just cash out. Cash out. And I was never a bad husband.
Yeah.
I mean, it was never really a bad husband that didn't come home at nights or.
But you're making a living, and she'll deal with it.
Yeah.
And she's the little woman.
That's the home.
Yeah.
All hunch she gathers.
The little woman deal with it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then to throw another baby into the mix, that just put this, I have to work hard and grin and bear my way through this, intensified that fire.
Yeah.
Made me even more pushy, more obsessive with my job. And it took me further away from my family. So at this point, we got the heat turned up on us. I got to get a bigger castle. I got to get a bigger house. We can't be driving that small car. We got to get a big car. We got to get 2 car seats into it. And I just felt that pressure coming down on my chest. And it was such a crazy time in our life. I don't know how you stuck with me.
Well, then we decided that we needed to buy a house because we have this baby and I'm pregnant. And
The dog.
And we are living in an apartment. And so we tried to buy all these different houses and everything fell through. Nothing came together. So we thought, okay, fine, we'll rent a house. So we decided to rent a home. We moved in there, and we were there 35 days and found out that the home was completely contaminated with toxic mold.
And you're pregnant.
And I'm pregnant.
And you got a baby.
And we just found a tumor on his arm.
Oh my God.
So we had no idea if that was cancer. With him being a cancer survivor, that was a really scary thought. And we had hired a mold inspector and an attorney, and they told us we needed to leave the home. So here we are in a hotel room, pregnant, and our sweet little boy having so many health needs, and
And your dog.
Our dog.
And your dog.
It was a rough place to be. Absolutely.
Well, I have to say, I know you were saying, James, that you were kind of kicking yourself because you were throwing yourself into work. But a lot of guys would get an excuse to leave.
Yeah.
It's too, because in their mind, you have in your mind the kind of wife you want or whatever, and you have this fictionalized idea of your life, and this is upsetting your program.
Absolutely.
And especially very success-driven men. And it's important that you speak to it because a real man stands up.
Yeah.
And you stood up. You stood up.
Divorce has never been an option. We said that going into the relationship. We both came from homes that were split, and that was just never an option. And it was never even a
Thank
thought
God
process.
for that. Yeah.
And as I was sitting in a hotel room, I was the richest homeless man you'll ever meet. I got moved out of my home in the middle of the night because of something that I didn't do. Now, I've been wild and reckless in my past. I've bought motorcycles that put me into debt. I bought very, very fancy sports cars that put me into debt. And I could look back as I was eating the ramen noodles on the other side.
But I got my motorcycle.
Man, I brought this one on myself.
I understand.
But I was making decisions for the best interest of my family. And I want to say at this point in time, I had not found God. God had not came in and upset my apple cart yet.
But he came in, got mine.
He came in and got my wife during
Okay,
peace
so
house.
you got, tell us about this because something turned the tables.
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that.
I was just kind of at the end of my rope at that point in time. I unfortunately did tell Jamie at that moment in our life that I was done with our marriage. I felt like he had cashed out and I'm doing it on myself, so I might as well do it on myself.
Yeah.
And I'm pregnant. I had complications with my second pregnancy. They thought I had 3 miscarriages with my pregnancy.
Oh my God.
And here we lost everything. I was in that deep, dark, black pit.
Praise.
And this woman that I didn't really know, I met through someone else, invited me to come to church with her. And I thought, well, what the heck? At this point, I don't have
What do
anything
I have
else
to
to lose.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Yeah.
And
just so people understand, when you have mold infestation, you guys are saying it comes through the vents, it goes into your stereo equipment,
everything.
it goes everywhere, so you got to get rid of everything.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, we had tried to buy a couple other homes, so we had bought all new furniture. We had bought all new TVs.
Oh my God.
And when they told us that none of it can go because your TV's got a little fan that cools it off that sucks ventilation air in. So if you take the TV with you, mold comes with you, and you have a new outbreak somewhere else.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we had literally lost everything. We were at
Either had to have it specially cleaned to take it or throw it away.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
And so back to, she invites me to church, and I wasn't one to really show my emotion normally. Now I'm a totally different person, but I would never cry in front of somebody I didn't know. And the entire time I sat in that service, I bawled my eyes out uncontrollably. And at the end of service, the pastor asked if anybody wanted to give their life to the Lord, and I raised my hand and just gave him everything. And at the end of service, this woman walked up to me, and no one knew me, no one knew our situation, and she asked me if she could pray for the health of the baby in my belly. And I thought, once again, what the heck at this point? What's it going to hurt? And she put her hand on my little Luke in my belly, and she asked that the Lord would just heal him and bless him and keep him safe. And that is when I felt the power of Jesus just completely overcome me, the power of the Holy Spirit, and that was it. I was sold. There was no turning back for me at that point.
So you were radically saved.
Radically saved. Yes, completely.
And you come home to the 6'5" guy who's not.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he thought I was crazy. But what was so amazing about that in that moment is Luke, our second child, does not have the genetic deletion. Neither of us are carriers. We found out after the fact.
Yay.
So
yes,
it was awesome.
yes.
Awesome.
And who knows, that lady that asked you to pray, it could have been an intervention right there.
Yeah,
but now you got to tell me, how did this work? Because you've had this shift in your life, and you come home to the macho guy.
He's watching football on the couch.
Yeah.
And he just asked me how it was. I said good, and every Sunday I continued to go, and I would ask him, and he said, no, I'm not interested. And I said, okay. I didn't push it. And then, so that was in February, and then Mother's Day comes, and he says to me, well, I think maybe I'll come with you today because I don't want those people at church to feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
And here I'm thinking, trust me, they don't feel sorry for me at all. They feel sorry for you.
Oh my God, this is awesome.
And I thought, okay. So sure, come with me. And he did. And then you can share what happened that day.
Yeah, tell us about this. So you go to this church.
I come walking into church. I was not really a church guy.
Right. Okay.
And there's this slick-looking, surfer-looking guy. Had a little
with
mustache
a motorcycle.
And I come walking in. He comes running up to me and says, "Man, we are so happy you're here. Let me give you a hug."
Oh, Lord.
And I looked at this guy and I said, "Man, I'm going to break your arms. Don't be touching me." And the guy steps away and says, "You must be Maria's husband. Gee, we've heard all about you.
We know who you are.
Welcome. Come on in." So I walk in. I'm sitting in the back of the church, and my arms all crossed up. I don't want to be here, man. And that surfer dude walks up to the front of the stage and gets up and gives us a gospel message like I'd never heard ever in my life.
The surfer dude, the
surfer
little
dude.
guy.
I just told him, so the pastor, I just told him I was going to break his arms. Now I
Oh
want
my
out of
God.
here.
Oh my God.
I want out of Dodge because that's not
The
right.
conviction is sitting in,
Absolutely.
But there's 2 points I want to make. One, God has been so faithful to me to send me the perfect man in my life to speak volumes time in and time out. But my wife going to church, I saw a change in my wife. I saw a change in my woman, man. There was something marked different about my wife. And I had to get up off my couch and I had to go see what was making my wife so happy. I was provoked to jealousy.
It must be that man at that
It
church.
had to be something because my wife was glowing, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't give it to her. It was just like,
It's hilarious.
what is this? And when I walked in, I didn't want to be there. I was mad at him. All this bad stuff is happening because of him, right?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't because of him at all. And when God showed up and radically changed my wife, it was a switch. It was immediate. It was not a slow, drawn-out process. So any of your listeners, I would recommend, go give church a try. Just go show up and see what happens. And if your husband wants to sit at home, sit on the couch and watch his football, you go. You get filled with as much Holy Spirit and as much Jesus as you can, and pray and bring him along. It was rad because it took a strong woman. Strong woman to come into my life that I loved enough to change. Yeah. And a patient woman to stick around as that process took
through the change. Yeah.
So it was great because the pastor of that church met me right where I was at. Didn't judge me.
Oh, you got to tell him about that. Yeah, I love that. I love that part of the story. You got to share.
So he shows up, and my wife goes back home for a month every summer. I don't have to go to church, right? Wife's not here. I don't have to go to church. So my pastor,
I love it.
My pastor calls my wife in Kentucky and says, "Hey, big man's not in church. What's going on?"
Uh-oh. Busted.
I walk into church the next Sunday, and I'm like, "You called my wife?" He goes, "Yeah, we missed you, man." Well, that turned into an invitation to a poker game that we hosted.
Okay.
And my pastor at the time, he showed up at my poker game. He sat down at my poker table with all my poker buddies who were drinking, smoking cigars, and just doing what you do
guys
at a poker
do.
table. Yeah. He sat down and he was drinking ginger ale, telling really clean, funny jokes, and everybody else was. And
They were enjoying it, laughing.
He wiped out the table. So the next game he shows back up, and one of my buddies goes, "So what do you do for a living? How do you know Jamie?" He says, "Well, I'm Jamie's pastor." Everybody set their stuff down real quick, and they got really straight.
I'm not drinking. That's not a cigarette. This is not smoke coming out of my mouth.
But it was so rad because this man met me right where I was at. He didn't judge me.
Yeah.
He didn't condemn me. He met me right where I was at.
Sounds like somebody else I know.
Yeah, Jesus' character. It was awesome because he showed up and he showed me what it really meant to go to church and be part of a church family. About the time I got into a routine and really liking this guy, God had transferred him to the East Coast. I don't have to go to church no more because my buddy just got transferred. Right? And I wanted men. I wanted mighty men to show up, and the pastor that followed him up showed up in spades. Man, it was awesome. He was a radical dude. And he met me right where I was at. And I always say my first pastor got me to go to church. Got me past the whole, I guess, phobias of what church was. The next pastor taught me what it meant to really walk like a Christian. He showed me what a Christian man is supposed to walk like. He showed me what the guys like Peter, 6'5", 200 pounds, fisher of men. Showed me what Paul looked like. And no longer Jesus was this little stained glass window walking around with a butterfly on his finger. Showed me what a man really was supposed to look like in God.
And it's really a blessing that he was that kind of man, because many times when people come to church, the pastor's just that person way down in the front, and there's no mentoring and there's no shifting. It used to be when people came to know God, there was a change. Like you said, my wife changed, and you can feel the glow. You felt the change, but thank God where you came to church it was something real. It wasn't.
It was very biblical. I mean, these guys were coming alongside me. It was a very skin-on-skin ministry. Yeah. They were discipling me. Yeah. I was hanging out with cool guys, and they were showing me what it meant to be a Christian man. Wow. I ended up getting baptized. And it was crazy because I had no idea why I was getting baptized. I was like, and I called my buddy up, and I was like, so everybody's telling me I need to get baptized. I got baptized as a baby. I said, is this just an obedience thing? He goes, we'll get you baptized. I said, sure. He says, then it's an obedience thing. And where I really got saved was when I went into the water. I went down, and I came back out, and a butterfly didn't land on my thing. A ray of sunlight didn't fall down on me. When I came out of the water, I saw two eyes looking back at me, and it was my baby boy, my oldest boy. And that's all I saw. I didn't change. I wasn't different. I wasn't this brand new creation. But it was such a pretense for what was about to come. my friend who was the pastor ended up getting transferred. So that's the second pastor I got transferred. And it was Halloween day, and this is where the actual miracle happened, where I really got saved, and where I found out that I found out God's real. And if you want, I mean, I'll get into that aspect at this point.
Yeah, please do, and tell us about your child, because we want all of that.
Yeah.
So my son suffered severely with seizures, and they weren't just simple seizures; they were pretty throw you to the ground, intense seizures. And he's at 4 years old. He's had multiple surgeries. His ears were restored, his eyes were restored, but we kept having these seizures. Now, at this point in time, my wife is on the worship team at church, and she is at church on a Saturday night when our friend, the pastor, was announcing to the congregation that he was leaving, taking another assignment in another church. I was home by myself with my older boy. Maria had the baby, and I said earlier, if somebody comes into my home, I'll deal with them. I'm 6'5", I'll beat them. When the bad guy came into my home, you know what I did? I froze. My son had a seizure that was so bad, he was turning blue. I froze so bad that I couldn't even dial 911 on a phone. All I could do was just sit there and watch my baby seize. I hit redial, honey, baby's seizing, please get home, please get home. And my wife came flying into the neighborhood, and we jumped in the car and we ran up to the emergency room. And we went into the emergency room, and the doctors, and it's a metaphor, but the doctors kind of looked at me and says, I can't help him. So they looked at him, they gave him a once over, they said, he looks to be okay, let's send him home. And I looked at the doctor and I says, Doc, I'm tired of coming here. I'm tired of coming to please run a test. What's wrong with my baby?
He was 2 years old then?
He was 4. He was 4 at this time.
Okay.
So they ran the test, and my son was anxious. He was upset. He didn't want to be there, and I felt guilty. I was like, man, I just put my son through all this again. And almost like clockwork, my son sat up in bed and had a worse seizure this time. And you don't ever want to hear the words code in an emergency room. And doctors just started popping out of everywhere, man. And I'm looking at the doctor, and there's nothing he could do. I couldn't fix my baby, and the doctor couldn't fix my baby. I was so hopeless. I was so broken. To say the least, they ended up checking us in. They kept us overnight. Instead of sending us home, they kept us. And I sat there watching my son's chest going up and down for hours on end. And I couldn't take my eyes off my baby. I just wanted to make sure he was safe. And my wife stayed in the hospital with us, and it was just so uncomfortable. It's not a place that I wanted to be. Now, I had gotten baptized, but I hadn't really fell in love with Jesus yet. I hadn't fell in love with what God's call on my life was yet. Do you have anything you want to put in at this point? So it was Halloween weekend, and my wife went to church, and there was a little lady that came down from L.A. just every now and again. Just, you tell this portion of it.
Well, the next morning, it was Halloween on Sunday, and a family from church had our younger child at the time. And so I wanted to go see him, and at this point, only the pastors knew what had happened and that Austin was in the hospital. And this lady had come down from LA, and she was in the front, and she turned around and she looked at me, and she walks to the back of the church, and she said, "You need to get it together and go pray that devil out of your baby."
Okay.
So yes, now coming from a Catholic background, we used to call this the wooby-dooby stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like, what is this? I thought, okay, well, Lord, you know what's happening. And I went up to our associate pastor and his wife, and they said, okay, we'll just come to the hospital and pray over him. Like, that's what the Bible tells us to do. That's what the Lord says. You pray over your baby. And so I called Jamie and I said, okay, we're going to come to the hospital tonight and we're going to pray over him and just ask the Lord to heal him.
Little Hail Mary and some holy water. That's just what you do with people when they're in the hospital.
Dominos on the Spirit of Santa.
So she comes back up to the hospital. I go home. I go spend some time with my son. And as I was driving home, I couldn't drive past a Toys R Us without buying my son something. And it hit me so clearly. If I believe one word of the Bible, I got to believe every word of that Bible.
Yeah.
If I believe in God, I got to believe in the devil.
Yep.
And I had this epiphany, and I just had this flash of all the places I'd been, all the near misses that I'd had. And it hit me. I've been hunted. I've been hunted from a very, very early age. The ditches that I got pulled out of, the motorcycles that I didn't die on, all these silly circumstances in my life of recklessness, I've been hunted.
And you're still here.
And if God's got a plan for me, the devil had a plan for me, and it was to wipe me out. And it was rad because he was coming after the one thing where I was vulnerable, was my babies, was my wife and my family. And it became so clear, and it became such an epiphany that God is real. God is so real. And for the first time, I really had to step away and look at life in a different set of eyes. So I come back up, and my son was in intensive care. And Isolation. And we were there. Our associate pastor came up. It was after hours. We weren't supposed to be there. And as we were sitting in there, my wife jumps into bed with my son. She was just holding my son. And our associate pastor had a normal Bible, New King James Bible, reading out of it. And his wife was standing right by his side, just reading scripture. Nothing crazy, nothing out of whack. And my 4-year-old son looks at me and says, "Daddy, tell them to stop. They're hurting me."
Wow.
And
Wait. The Bible reading, he was saying the Bible reading is hurting me.
No, Daddy, they are hurting me.
They are hurting me.
Looked right at me.
Wow.
Son, that's your mama in bed with you, son. She's not hurting you. We'll be fine. We'll get this over with. We'll be done. And then we just kept going. My wife was just singing worship songs. A few minutes later, my son, 4 years old, looks at me and says, "Daddy, who's God?" Who's God? I couldn't answer. I had no idea. He's the big man upstairs we pray to, son. Yeah, he loves you, man. My son looks at me and says, "Daddy, who's Jesus? He doesn't love me." I had no answers for him. That fight or flight thing kicked in on me. I've seen enough. I'm out of here. I cannot deal with this. That wooby jooby is starting to pop off in this room. I want nothing to do with it. And I got up and I walked out. I took 2 steps to the door and I heard an audible voice. "Lead your family. Lead your family. Engage. Turn around and engage." And I turned around, I put my hand on my baby, and I prayed for the first time in my life.
Wow.
No idea what came out of my mouth. I stood up and I did what God called me to do, and that was lead my family. I declared what the Word said. I prayed in Jesus' name. And my 4-year-old son sits up in a hospital bed and smiles a big, giant smile and says, "Daddy, I'm all better. Jesus just healed me." And out of his mouth starts singing the song, "Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible told me so."
But this was the kid that said, "Tell him to stop because it's hurting me."
Yeah. And the message I heard the week before was even the demons know who Jesus is, but they cannot profess his name and they cannot praise him. I saw my baby sit up in bed and start singing, "Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible told me so." It wasn't this, it was this. We got checked out of that hospital the next day. Doctor said, "We can't find nothing wrong with you."
Wow.
My son, who was not supposed to live past 2 years of age, is 9 years old today. My son, who was blind, can see. My son, who was deaf, can hear. My son was born with a bicuspid aortic valve. Not if we were having surgery, but when we had surgery.
Jeez, I got them all over me now.
2 years ago, my dad passed away with a bicuspid aortic valve. My son has a bicuspid aortic valve. That brought back a whole bunch of bad memories when we were walking through this. My dad, he had a good life. My baby, I don't want this to happen to him. My son had a bicuspid aortic valve. You're supposed to have 3 leaves. He had 2 leaves. We went into a doctor's appointment, a year ago? That bicuspid aortic valve has repaired itself. We won't have to do any surgeries.
Wow.
My son is a true gray belt in Gracie Barra Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Wow.
My son played in his first football game. My son played in his first basketball game.
The same son that was blind, deaf, with the bicuspid valve disorder, with the chromosomal abnormality, who's not supposed to live past, 2 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Jesus came in and healed my baby.
Wow.
And what is so amazing is not only did we get to see that, but he also understands what happened. And not long after he was healed in the hospital, he asked us if he could be baptized
Wow.
at 4 years old. And I said to him, well, we need to make sure you understand what that means before you make that choice. And he looked right at us and he said, I know what that means, and I want to live for Jesus.
Wow.
And he got baptized.
Now, let me ask you this question, because I mean, I'm overwhelmed right now, because what if you hadn't turned around? You know what I mean? But you did, and you turned around and you prayed the prayer. Has your son ever said what happened to him at 4 years old when he was there? Did he see Jesus? Did he feel like, you know, did he may, at 4 years old, you may not know how to verbalize all of that, but the evidence is here. You got it in the medical records. I was blind and now I see, you know what I mean?
I call it the 12-inch drop. I had a revelation who God was. Now, God loves my baby so much, even if I would have walked out of that door, my son would have been healed. God's plan is so much bigger than my plan. I did nothing. It was God's plan. And God found me. I say Psalms 119 is kind of my verse. It's through my afflictions I found my faith. And it took that deep, dark spot for me to find my faith. Jesus would have found my baby right where he was at. He would have been fine with or without me. I had nothing to do with it. It's all Jesus.
I just wanted to share quickly that what we've realized in all of this is, you know, the doctors told us he was going to be blind by a certain age. So he was still seeing when all this happened, but he would be going blind. And I have this plaque in our house that says, when the world said no, God said yes. Because the truth is that God writes our story. And it doesn't matter what other people say or what doctor says. What God says is what the truth is.
Word.
And no matter what he does, he has the final say in our life. And he had the final say of where his life would be today.
And, you know, for our viewers and listeners out there, you may have gotten a diagnosis and it may look bleak, but you're looking at a miracle. You're looking at two people that witnessed, you know, not just the saving grace, as amazing as that is, but a child that was not supposed to live past 2, supposed to be deaf and blind. The valve in his heart literally repaired itself. And some people will say, oh, it's a coincidence. I say it's a God incidence.
Absolutely.
It's intervention. And, you know, in the Bible, very few people really live the Bible. In the Bible, it talks about Jesus prayed and the devils went out and got in the pigs, and the pigs didn't even want them. They went and drowned themselves. You know, so there are forces that are unseen that can cause illness and anomalies. But if you're looking at this story and you're saying, wow, it happened for them, it could happen for you too. You're looking at the Kesslers, a living miracle. And if you want to hear more, is there a way they can read about your story? And what was the magazine? Telega Life?
It was Telega Life magazine.
Okay. What month was that published?
December.
December 2014. So they can go, can you spell it? Telega Life?
Talega Life
magazine, and look up the December issue. And we have it on the screen now so people can see your picture up and close, because their story was told in the magazine, but it's going to go all over the world. Because people need to know, because don't let the doctor be your rate limiting factor. They are living witnesses that the doctor doesn't have the last word. There is a physician, and his name was Jesus.
Amen.
And he changed all.
Absolutely.
Well, you're live with the Love Doctor. I'm Dr. Ann Love. You've met with the Kesslers, Maria and James Kessler. And their baby is alive and well, playing football and doing jiu-jitsu 9 years later. Tune in next week. to Live with the Love Doctor. I'm Dr. Ann Love.